When I was 18, 19 years old, I was still living in my mama's house in community college, not knowing what I wanted to do in my life. Well, I knew that I wanted to do music, but I didn't know how I was going to do it. I didn't have any resources, I didn't have any connections. This is back in 2014, 2015, and the internet wasn't the way that it is now, where things are so readily available. There's a bunch of online tutorials on how to do everything, how to get your cover art, how to get your songs mixed, what equipment to make, not make, but what equipment to purchase for you to be able to record in the home. I didn't have any of that. I was just at home, going to school, working at a cheesesteak shop for minimum wage. I think a little bit over minimum wage after I worked there for about a year. At this cheesesteak shop, I did everything. I did literally everything that you could think of. Uh, I cleaned, mopped the floors, I washed the dishes, I cleaned out the fryer, I cleaned out the grease traps above the oven, above the stove and above the fryer and everything. I made the pizzas. I cleaned out the oven of the stove. I cleaned out the pizza area at the end of the night. And every night I would come home at about 12 or 1 in the morning because they stayed open until 11 o'clock. And then I would play video games until 3 in the morning. After that, I'd fall asleep, probably, once everybody decided that they were done for the night. And then I'd go get something to eat, and I'd be asleep until about 1 o'clock in the morning. I mean, in the afternoon. 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I would sleep all the way until 1 in the afternoon. At that point, I then have to go into work the next day at 4. So by the time I woke up, I had exactly 3 hours that's left to myself for the rest of the day until I go back into work. Now, mind you, I'm 18. I'm 19 years old at the time. I'm relatively young. Uh, this is probably what most young kids do. They're working when they go to school. They have a minimum wage job. They work at McDonald's. They work at Subway. They work at Chipotle. They work at Starbucks. The whole 9 yards. It's nothing special, but it was something about working in this minimum wage cheesesteak shop that was crushing to my soul, and I don't know exactly what it was. When you grow up, you kind of have an ego. You kind of have a complex about yourself. Uh, some type of mentality that you're too good to do certain things, or you feel like you are better than certain things, certain opportunities, certain jobs, certain positions, and so you don't really go for them. You don't really entertain them until you kind of have to, until your back is against the wall, or until you're faced with the reality of the fact that yes, this is the type of job that you're gonna have to take on. Which is what pretty much what happened to me. I wanted to do something a little bit more interesting, a little bit more, um, I don't want to say glamorous, but just interesting, cool, and I was working at a cheesesteak shop. At the cheesesteak shop was the owner. He was late 40s, early 50s. He was divorced and he hated his ex-wife. Basically, he said that she cleaned him out for everything and she's living her best life with her boy toy, and she's never gonna marry this other dude that she's dating and she's lavishing gifts with and has in the home that they had built together, because of the fact that if she were to remarry, he would then not have to pay alimony anymore, and so she's just going to game the system. Uh, a cashier who was a neighbor. She lived like a couple blocks away from me in the neighborhood. She had a couple of kids in high school. I went to high school with her daughter. When I was a senior, I think her daughter was a freshman, and so that I loosely knew of her daughter from there, and so then I knew her, and we made that connection. Um, there was another guy. He was also like in his late 30s, maybe early 40s, white man with dreads. So that kind of tells you what type of time he was on. Who was like the backup main cook, and a couple of other people. But I tell you this to kind of paint the picture of me being the youngest person there at this cheesesteak shop. And once again, I'm reiterating that I'm getting paid minimum wage for what I do. And what I'm doing is only like a step below pretty much what anybody else is doing at the time. I know how to work the cashier. I know how to stock the shelves, take out the trash, all that. I'm pretty much I do everything except being the main cheesesteak cook because that's what the owner usually did, and then that's what he would have the other 30-year-old, 40-year-old guy do until he fired him for closing in the shop early and taking more food home than he needed to take home, and he put somebody else in charge. So, but I was always kind of that second position, and I looked around and I took note of the fact that I was the youngest person there by a considerable amount. Like 20-year gap with some of these people. And it was wild to me because of the fact that, you expect kids to work fast food restaurants. You expect kids to work in these type of service jobs. A lot of people, that's your first job that you get. You learn a lot about yourself. You learn a lot about the workforce, and it's easy. You don't need that much training. You don't need to have a big resume to get these jobs. So it's very very simple for you to apply and for you to get the job. So to see these people here that were so much older than me and they had kids and they had families, it was jarring because of the fact that that was their life at that point. That was their life. They were 20 years old, like I was at a certain point, and they grew up in the same town that the cheesesteak shop was at, and they had kids, had a family, got a house in the same neighborhood, and they lived there, and they worked there, and that was it. That was the extent of their life was working at this cheesesteak shop, more or less. And they didn't want anything else. I don't think. Well, I won't say that they didn't want anything else, but for the majority of the time I was there, they were there. And then when I left and joined the military, and I would come back home, they were still there. And that's years after the fact. It made me reflect on what I wanted for myself in life because of the fact that I feel that sometimes people get trapped in places in their life. Sometimes people get too comfortable and they don't get out of themselves. They don't put themselves in new circumstances. They don't take risks. Sometimes that's for the circumstances of you get your girl pregnant and now you guys have a kid. You both are young and you have to make do and you have to figure it out as you go along. Sometimes it's just not knowing how, not having the resources, not having parents to guide you on the way to show you to how to pick a career and to make a path, or even giving you different options to say, hey, maybe you should join the military, or hey, maybe you should take an internship for whatever. Some type of recommendation on how to further progress yourself versus whatever you're doing at that particular moment in time. I said it because there's so many people that are probably in the same predicament in their lives that they have essentially been trapped into something that they might not necessarily have wanted for themselves. They might not have envisioned that for themselves when they were growing up, when they were in middle school, when they were in high school. But that's where they're at now. And it's interesting because when I saw it, I was so appalled. I was so taken aback. Every day when I would go into work, I would hate it because of the fact that I didn't want to stay there for my whole life. And I knew that I could. I knew that I could. It was easy enough to do. I go into work. It's simple. It doesn't take too much brain power calculating. You kind of have to get into the tempo of moving around and knowing how everything works and being at a certain tempo. But it wasn't rocket science. It didn't really take anything complicated or anything complex thought pattern to perform any of the actions that this job required. And I could do it. I could go into work, do it for 3 or 4 days. I would work, go to school, come home and play video games, buy the new Air Jordans when they come out every now and again, and go out with my friends when I go out with my friends, and then that would be it. But I wanted more. I wanted more out of life. I wanted more out of myself. Growing up, my mom always told me I could be anything that I wanted to be. And that's such an encouraging statement to give to a kid, to give to a child, to say, hey, anything you want to do, you can do. You can achieve it. You put in the time, you put in the effort, it's going to happen. And I appreciated the motivation, but I felt that at a certain extent, sometimes that can be to your own detriment of the knowledge or that advice of you can do anything that you want. Because then it kind of leaves you aimless, kind of leaves you without direction of, well, what do I want to do? If I can do anything, what do I want to do? Because if I can do anything, everything sounds appealing. I want to be a movie star. I want to be a rapper. I want to be a basketball player. I want to be a doctor. I want to be a lawyer. I want to be an astronaut. I want to be um, the president of the United States. But then where do I hone in and actually pick it? Because if I can be anything, it all seems appealing. It would be like going to an all-you-can-eat buffet and saying you can eat everything here. You can eat anything. Anything you want is yours. And then you're not in a particular mood for any type of food. You're not, sometimes when you're hungry, you want Chinese food. Sometimes when you're hungry, you want wings. Sometimes you want pizza. And then that's easy because you can just make the call, go right to the food that you want, and you say, "This is what I want." You get what you want, and you're satisfied. But when you go in there, you're not particularly hungry for anything in particular. You're kind of aimless because the Chinese food looks good, the Mexican food looks good, the pizza looks good, the wings look good. Which one do I want? And you, you, I've gotten into a point where it's sort of a analysis paralysis of not being able to hone in on what it is that I exactly wanted to do until I got to the point where I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew what I didn't want to do. I knew I didn't want to be at that cheesesteak shop anymore. I knew I didn't want to be in my mom's house still. I knew I didn't want to just wander through life and be a passive spectator. I wanted to do something. I didn't know what it is that I wanted to do, but I knew I didn't want to do what I was doing at that particular time. And that was great. That was the perfect thing for me because it set in motion a bunch of events that happened that has made my life a lot better. Better than I could have ever imagined to be at the age that I'm at and to have the things that I have and to have I can't talk. A trajectory moving forward still being in that position of I could do anything that I want to do, but now I have even more to do whatever I want to do, and still kind of not being aimless, but still sometimes having that anxiety, sometimes still having that loss of focus. I think that sometimes in life we focus on where we're at. We think about where we're going to do or where we're going, and we don't necessarily know where we're going, or we're not know not where we're going, but we don't know how to get there. And that's where I feel like I'm at right now. Just like I felt however many years before when I was still living at home of I know a place, I know somewhere that I want to be. I can see this oasis in the desert that I'm walking through, but I don't know how to walk up to it. I don't know the exact path to get to it. And I'm saying all this because I'm speaking to myself right now, and I want myself to know that it's gonna be okay. Just like it was okay when I didn't know what I wanted to do back then, because I made it this far. And if I made it this far, then I can make it further. Even if I don't have all the answers, even if I don't have it all figured out, it doesn't matter because of the fact that I just need to move. I just need to do it. I just need to take one more step forward. Because if I do, then I won't be where I was. And I didn't like where I was. I like a lot more where I'm at now, but I'm gonna like even more where I'm gonna be at. Everything happens for a reason. We all have our story to play out, and I'm still playing out mine. So, no matter what, no matter what, no matter what, just keep going for yourself. For if for no other reason, if for nothing else than for yourself. Do it for yourself because you deserve it. Because you've done more for yourself than anybody could ask for. Because if you didn't, you'd still be in that cheesesteak shop. You'd still be living at home, still trying to figure it out. You're still trying to figure it out now, but you're figuring it out in LA in your own crib. So maybe that's it. Maybe I'm still figuring out. I'm just in a perpetual state of figuring it out. And but at least if I move while I figure it out, I will not be in where I was at before figuring it out. I'm not still at home trying to figure it out. Not still at the cheesesteak shop figuring it out. Not still in community college trying to figure it out. I'm on my own, making my own money, in a good spot, figuring it out. And that's the best place to be. So